A man insults Steve Harvey on a first-class flight and instantly regrets it when the truth is revealed. What starts as a careless moment of arrogance becomes a life-altering wake-up call. In the next few minutes, you're going to witness a transformation so powerful, it will make you question every judgment you've ever made about someone. This isn't just a story about a rude remark. It's about the devastating consequences of prejudice, the shocking truth that changes everything, and the unexpected grace that follows. Stick around, because the payoff will leave you speechless. The morning sun gleams off the polished fuselage as Mark strides through the jet bridge, his designer suit perfectly pressed, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the carpeted floor with each confident step. First class. Always first class. He's earned it, or so he tells himself. The gold card in his wallet proves it. Platinum status. Elite membership. These are the badges of honor for a man like Mark. As he settles into his spacious leather seat, Mark surveys the cabin with a critical, almost predatory eye, mentally cataloging every passenger, every detail, every perceived flaw. He's a man accustomed to being the smartest person in the room, the most successful, the most important. His eyes scan left, then right, assessing who's worth acknowledging and who isn't. That's when he sees him. Steve Harvey, unmistakable, the famous comedian and television host, seated just a few rows ahead in his own first-class seat. Mark's lip curls slightly, a sneer forming at the corners of his mouth. Of course, he mutters under his breath, shaking his head with visible disdain. Even here. Mark leans back in his seat, crossing his arms over his chest like a king surveying his kingdom. He's seen Steve on TV countless times over the years, always performing, always trying to be funny, always desperate for attention and validation from the masses. Washed up, Mark thinks to himself, the judgment crystallizing in his mind like ice. A relic trying to stay relevant in a world that's moved on without him. In Mark's carefully constructed worldview, there's a clear hierarchy, and celebrities like Steve? They're overrated, overpaid, and completely out of touch with the reality that hard-working businessmen like himself navigate every single day. His two closest friends settle into the seats beside him. Fellow executives from his firm, men who share his worldview and feed his ego with their agreement. Mark can't help but voice his judgment, unable to resist the opportunity to demonstrate his superiority. "Look at him," he whispers loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear, nodding toward Steve with a smirk that drips with contempt. Still riding on his old fame, trying to convince himself he still matters. Pathetic, really. The words hang in the air between them like poison gas, and Mark feels a surge of superiority wash over him, warming him from the inside out. He's the one who's built something real, something tangible, something that generates millions of dollars in revenue every quarter. What has Steve done? Made people laugh? Told jokes on television? That's not real work. That's not real success. That's entertainment. The lowest form of contribution to society, in Mark's estimation. Mark's friends chuckle nervously, though there's an undercurrent of discomfort in their laughter. One of them glances toward Steve's direction, a flicker of concern crossing his face. But Mark doesn't notice. He's too absorbed in his own sense of righteousness, too convinced of his own superiority to read the room. The flight attendant approaches with a warm smile, offering champagne and appetizers. But Mark waves her away dismissively. He pulls out his phone, checking his stock portfolio, his emails, the endless stream of notifications that validate his importance. He's a man of consequence, a man of power, a man who doesn't have time for celebrities or their desperate attempts to stay relevant. Little does Mark know, his words have traveled further than he intended. in the quiet moments between conversations, in the subtle shifts of attention. The seeds of consequence have been planted. The universe, it seems, has a way of teaching lessons to those who are arrogant enough to think they're above everyone else. But Mark was about to make a decision that would haunt him forever. The plane has been in the air for about 20 minutes, cruising at a comfortable altitude of 35,000 feet as the breakfast service begins in earnest. The flight attendants move gracefully through the narrow aisles, their practiced smiles and professional demeanor creating an atmosphere of refined civility. Mark has settled into a false sense of security, convinced that his earlier comments have been forgotten, absorbed into the white noise of the cabin, dissolved into the background like so much hot air. He's wrong. Dangerously, catastrophically wrong. The champagne flute in Mark's hand is now on his second refill, and the alcohol is beginning to loosen the already fragile restraints on his tongue. Emboldened by his friend's nervous laughter and the warm buzz of intoxication that makes him feel invincible, Mark's arrogance reaches a fever pitch, a crescendo of ego that propels him toward a decision that will define the rest of his life. He decides to make his move, not physically, but verbally. It's a calculated act of dominance, a display of power designed to remind everyone in the cabin exactly who Mark is and why he matters. He unbuckles his seatbelt with deliberate slowness, the click seeming to echo through the cabin. He stands up, stretching dramatically, extending his arms above his head and arching his back in an exaggerated display of comfort and confidence. His tailored suit catches the light as he moves, the fabric whispering softly with each gesture. He's making sure his presence is known throughout the cabin, making sure that everyone understands he's someone worth noticing. As he walks toward the lavatory, his footsteps measured and deliberate, he passes directly by Steve's seat. This is his moment. This is where Mark decides to cross a line he can never uncross, a boundary he didn't even know existed until the moment he obliterated it. The cabin seems to sense what's about to happen. There's a subtle shift in the air, a change in pressure, as if the atmosphere itself is bracing for impact. "Hey, Steve," Mark calls out, his voice dripping with mock friendliness and barely concealed contempt. The entire cabin seems to freeze instantaneously, as if someone has pressed pause on the world. Conversations stop mid-sentence, words hanging incomplete in the air. Passengers turn their heads in unison, their eyes swiveling toward the source of the commotion. Even the flight attendants pause in their duties, their hands frozen mid-motion as they hold trays of food and beverages. All eyes are now on Mark, the man who's about to say something he can never take back. Steve looks up from his newspaper slowly, deliberately, as if he's already anticipated this moment. His expression is remarkably calm and composed, his face a mask of practiced serenity. But there's a flicker of something in his eyes, a recognition, perhaps, of what's about to happen. A sadness that comes from understanding the depths of human cruelty, a wisdom that only comes from having lived long enough to see the worst in people. Mark doesn't wait for a response. He's too far gone now, too committed to his own narrative of superiority. The words tumble out like venom from a snake's fangs, like poison seeping through the air, contaminating everything they touch. "You know, I've always wondered, what's it like to be completely irrelevant? To have had your 15 minutes of fame, your moment in the sun, and now just fade into obscurity, to become invisible. I mean, when's the last time anyone actually cared about what you had to say? When's the last time you mattered?" Mark laughs, a harsh, cutting sound that echoes through the first-class cabin like the crack of a whip. It's the laugh of someone who believes his own superiority so completely that he can't imagine anyone challenging it. His friends, sitting several rows back, cringe visibly, their faces flush with embarrassment. One of them puts his head in his hands, unable to watch the train wreck unfolding before him. The other stares intently at his lap, pretending to be deeply fascinated by the pattern of his pants. But Mark continues, unstoppable now, riding the wave of his own cruelty like a surfer riding the perfect wave. I bet you tell yourself you're still important, still relevant, still matter to people. I bet you look in the mirror every morning and convince yourself that you're still the same guy everyone used to care about. But the truth is, nobody really cares anymore, Steve. You're just a relic, a has-been trying to convince himself that he still has something to offer the world. It's actually kind of sad when you think about it. Pathetic, even. You're like a ghost haunting your own life, trying to relive glory days that are long gone. Mark's voice grows louder, more aggressive, as if he's trying to convince himself as much as anyone else. His face is flushed, his eyes bright with the intoxicating rush of power that comes from publicly humiliating someone. And the worst part? You probably actually believe that people respect you, that they look up to you. But they don't, Steve. They pity you. They see you as a cautionary tale, a warning about what happens when you peak too early and have nowhere to go but down. The cabin is completely silent now. The kind of silence that feels suffocating, oppressive, heavy with judgment and disbelief. Even the engines seem to quiet down, as if the plane itself is holding its breath, as if the very aircraft is recoiling from the cruelty being expressed within its metal walls. The flight attendants exchange worried glances, their professional composure cracking slightly. Some passengers shake their heads slowly in disapproval, their expressions a mixture of shock and disgust. Others pull out their phones discreetly, already recording, already preparing to share this moment with the world. The internet, they know, will have a field day with this. Steve's jaw tightens slightly, a barely perceptible movement. His hands, which were holding his newspaper, slowly lower to his lap with deliberate care. His knuckles turn white as he grips the armrests, but his face remains eerily calm. For a moment, his eyes meet Mark's directly, and there's something in that gaze. Not anger, not hurt, not even indignation. Instead, there's a deep, penetrating sadness. A sadness that comes from recognizing the brokenness in another human being. A sadness that suggests Steve has seen this kind of behavior before, that he understands the insecurity and fear that drives men like Mark to lash out. Mark feels a flicker of something then, a tiny spark of doubt, a whisper of conscience that he immediately tries to extinguish like a candle flame in a hurricane. He waves his hand dismissively and continues toward the lavatory, his stride slightly less confident than before, as if his words were nothing more than idle commentary, as if he hadn't just publicly humiliated a man in front of dozens of witnesses. But the damage is done. The words are out there, hanging in the air like a stain that can never be fully cleaned, like graffiti on the walls of this cabin that will remain forever. And though Mark tries to convince himself that he doesn't care, that Steve deserved it, that it was all just a joke, something deep inside him knows the truth. He's crossed a line, and there's no going back. The flight attendants exchange worried glances, their professional composure strained to the breaking point. Some passengers shake their heads in disapproval, their expressions a mixture of shock and disgust. Others pull out their phones, already recording, already preparing to share this moment with the world. Mark, however, remains oblivious to the full weight of what he's done, oblivious to the judgment radiating from every corner of the cabin. He returns to his seat, trying to recapture the sense of superiority that had felt so good just moments before. But it's different now. The champagne tastes bitter on his tongue, like ashes in his mouth. The seat feels uncomfortable, as if it's rejecting him. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice is whispering that he's made a terrible mistake. A mistake so profound that it will echo through the rest of his life. But Mark pushes that voice away. He's too proud, too convinced of his own righteousness, too invested in his own narrative of superiority to listen to it now. He tells himself that he doesn't care what anyone thinks. He tells himself that Steve probably deserved it. He tells himself that this will be forgotten by tomorrow. He's wrong about all of it. What Mark didn't know was that this insult was about to trigger a chain of events that would change everything. His reputation, his career, his understanding of himself, and his entire worldview. The consequences were about to come crashing down on him like a tsunami, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The plane continues its steady ascent through the layers of atmosphere, the powerful engines humming their constant, rhythmic song. The cabin is bathed in the soft, golden light of the morning sun, streaming through the windows, creating shadows and highlights across the faces of the passengers. Mark sinks deeper into his seat, trying desperately to shake off the weight of what he's just done. But it lingers like a dense fog in his mind, refusing to dissipate no matter how hard he tries to push it away. He fidgets with his cufflinks obsessively, his fingers restless as they trace the polished metal surface again and again. The glint of the material catches the light, reflecting back at him like a mirror of his own discomfort. His leg bounces up and down beneath the tray table, a nervous habit he thought he'd conquered years ago in therapy. The leather seat beneath him feels suddenly uncomfortable, as if it's rejecting his presence, as if even the plane itself is judging him for what he's done. In the rows behind him, whispers ripple through the cabin like waves spreading across water. Passengers lean toward one another, their voices low and conspiratorial, their words forming a soundtrack to Mark's growing anxiety. He catches fragments of conversation. "Did you see that?" And "That was completely uncalled for," and "I can't believe he said that." And each snippet feels like a knife twisting in his chest. Mark can feel their eyes on him, can sense the judgment hanging in the air like an uninvited guest at a party, like a specter haunting the cabin. It's as if the very fabric of the plane has turned against him, wrapping him in a suffocating cocoon of shame and regret. The air feels thicker somehow, heavier, as if it's pressing down on him with physical weight. He tries to ignore the murmurs, focusing instead on the in-flight entertainment screen in front of him. But the flickering images, a comedy special, ironically enough, do little to distract his racing thoughts. His mind is a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, anger at himself, defensiveness, denial, and beneath it all, a growing awareness that he has made a catastrophic mistake. Steve sits a few rows back, his silence a stark and powerful contrast to the chaos Mark has unleashed. The comedian has always been a master of reading a room, a skill honed over decades of performance and public interaction. Right now, he appears to be processing what just transpired with a quiet dignity that only deepens Mark's discomfort. There's no anger in Steve's posture, no visible rage or indignation. Instead, there's a composed acceptance, a kind of weary understanding that speaks volumes about his character and his experience with human cruelty. It gnaws at Mark, this realization. The fact that Steve isn't fighting back, isn't defending himself, isn't lashing out in return, it somehow makes everything worse. It exposes the hollowness of Mark's own behavior, the pettiness of his insult. He has treated someone with such disrespect, such casual cruelty, and that person has responded with grace. The contrast between them has never been more apparent, and it fills Mark with a shame so profound that he can barely breathe. As the flight progresses, minute by minute, hour by hour, Mark's bravado begins to crumble like ancient stone eroding under the relentless assault of wind and rain. The initial thrill of his insult, that rush of power and superiority, fades rapidly, replaced by a growing sense of unease that settles in his stomach like a stone. His mouth feels dry. His palms are sweating. Every muscle in his body feels tense, coiled like a spring ready to snap. He glances at his friends, who are now engaged in hushed conversations with one another, their laughter strained and forced, lacking the natural ease it had possessed just an hour earlier. They're unsure how to navigate the fallout, caught between their loyalty to Mark and the undeniable wrongness of his actions. The camaraderie that once felt so solid, so unshakable, begins to feel fragile, like glass teetering on the edge of a cliff, threatening to shatter at any moment. One of them, Tom, won't even meet his eyes. The other, David, keeps checking his phone compulsively, as if the answers to this moral dilemma might be found in his email. Mark's thoughts spiral into a labyrinth of self-doubt and self-recrimination. Was he really that cruel? Did he really think it was acceptable to humiliate someone like this? Someone he doesn't even know? Someone who has done nothing to him? The echoes of Steve's eyes haunt him like ghosts. A reminder that behind the laughter and the fame, behind the television appearances and the public persona, there's a human being with feelings and a history. Someone who has faced his own struggles and has likely endured far worse than Mark can imagine. He thinks about Steve's career, the decades of work, the countless hours spent perfecting his craft, the risks taken, the failures overcome. And Mark, in a moment of intoxicated arrogance, had tried to reduce all of that to nothing, to dismiss it as irrelevant. The cruelty of it strikes him now with renewed force, making his chest ache. The flight attendants resume their duties, moving gracefully through the aisles with practiced efficiency. But their smiles seem strained, their eyes occasionally flickering toward Mark as if assessing the situation, trying to determine if there will be further disruptions. One of them, a young woman with warm brown eyes and kind features, approaches his aisle. She hesitates for a moment, glancing at Mark's friends before focusing on him. Her expression is carefully neutral, professional, but there's something in her gaze that suggests she knows exactly what happened. "Is everything all right, sir?" she asks gently, concern etched on her face. It's a simple question, but it carries the weight of judgment and compassion simultaneously. She's asking if he's okay, but what she's really asking is, do you understand what you've done? Mark nods, forcing a smile that feels more like a grimace, more like a wound trying to heal. "Just fine, thank you," he replies, but his voice lacks conviction. It cracks slightly on the last word, betraying his emotional state. The attendant gives him a sympathetic nod before moving on, leaving Mark alone with his thoughts once again, alone with the growing realization of his own capacity for cruelty. He pulls out his phone with trembling fingers, mindlessly scrolling through social media, searching for a distraction, searching for anything that might pull his attention away from the abyss opening up inside him. But the posts he sees only amplify his discomfort exponentially. Photos of friends celebrating milestones, articles about Steve's latest projects and accomplishments, comments from fans expressing their admiration for the comedian, testimonials about how his work has changed their lives. All of it serves as a stark and brutal reminder of the chasm between them. Mark reads through the comments with growing horror. People talking about how Steve's comedy got them through difficult times. Stories of how his advice on his talk show helped people make important life decisions. Tributes to his kindness and generosity. And here, Mark is, having just tried to tear down the very thing that so many people clearly value and cherish. His pulse quickens as he realizes the full scope of what he's done. He has not only insulted a man with a career, but a man with a legacy. Someone who has touched countless lives, someone whose influence extends far beyond what Mark had even considered. The weight of this realization is crushing, almost unbearable. As the plane continues its journey through the vast expanse of sky, Mark's mind drifts back to his own career, the hard work, the late nights, the sacrifices he has made to rise to the top of his field. He had always prided himself on his accomplishments, on the empire he had built from the ground up. He had worn his success like a suit of armor, believing it made him invulnerable, made him superior, made him worth something. But in that moment of arrogance on the plane, in that cruel tirade directed at Steve, he sees how fragile that empire truly is, how precarious, how easily it can all come crashing down. Just one careless comment, one moment of weakness, one display of his true character can threaten to unravel everything he has worked for. The realization is terrifying. He thinks about what will happen when this story gets out. And it will get out. There are dozens of people on this plane with cameras and social media accounts. By the time they land, the story will likely be everywhere. Mark's reputation, carefully cultivated over years, could be destroyed in hours. His clients might abandon him. His colleagues might distance themselves. His friends might decide he's too much of a liability. The flight reaches cruising altitude, and the seatbelt sign dims with a soft chime, allowing passengers to move about the cabin freely. Mark feels trapped, ensnared in his own making, unable to escape the consequences of his actions. He glances back at Steve, who is now quietly engaged in conversation with another passenger. A woman who appears to be a teacher based on the snippets of conversation Mark can hear. The ease with which the comedian interacts, the way he can still command attention and evoke genuine laughter, stirs something deep within Mark. A flicker of envy, perhaps, mixed with something more complex. It's a recognition of his own insecurities, Mark realizes. He had attacked Steve because Steve represented something Mark could never be. Genuinely liked, genuinely appreciated, genuinely admired by people. Not because of money or status or power, but because of who he is as a person. And that realization cuts deeper than any insult ever could. Mark's heart races as he contemplates his next move, his options, his possibilities. Should he apologize? Should he confront Steve and try to make amends? The thought terrifies him more than anything he's experienced in years. What if Steve dismisses him? What if he laughs it off, exposing Mark's vulnerability to the entire cabin once again? What if Steve tells him that his apology is meaningless, that words can't undo the damage that's been done? But something inside him stirs, awakening like a sleeping giant, finally opening its eyes. It's a desire to right the wrong he has committed, a need that he can no longer ignore or suppress. With each passing moment, the weight of his actions becomes heavier, more suffocating, pressing down on him like a physical force. He knows that this is a pivotal moment, a crossroads that could alter the course of his life in fundamental ways. He feels the urgency to act before the moment slips away entirely, before he loses his nerve completely. His hands shake as he unbuckles his seatbelt. Taking a deep breath that feels inadequate, that doesn't fill his lungs with enough oxygen, he rises from his seat. His legs feel unsteady, as if they might betray him at any moment. He navigates through the narrow aisle, acutely aware of every eye upon him. Each step feels monumental, weighted with significance. And as he approaches Steve, he rehearses the words in his mind repeatedly. trying to find the right way to express his regret, trying to find words adequate to the task of genuine apology. "Steve," he begins, his voice shaky but resolute, the words emerging from a place of genuine vulnerability. The comedian turns to him, eyebrows raised, a hint of surprise flickering across his features. The cabin quiets again, all eyes now fixed on this unexpected confrontation, this moment of potential redemption or further humiliation. Mark stammers, the words feeling heavy in his throat, difficult to push past the lump that is formed there. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for what I said earlier. It was out of line, and honestly, I didn't think about how it would affect you. I was just trying to be funny, trying to impress my friends. But I see now that it was just cruel. Just needlessly, pointlessly cruel." His voice cracks on the last words, and he can feel tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. He's not a man who cries easily, not a man accustomed to showing vulnerability. But in this moment, the dam is breaking. Steve studies him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The tension in the cabin is palpable, suffocating, as if everyone is holding their breath simultaneously, waiting for the response that will determine what happens next. "You know, Mark," Steve finally replies, his voice steady and calm, infused with a kindness that Mark doesn't deserve. "We all have our moments. We all say things we regret, things that come from a place of insecurity or fear or pain. I appreciate you coming over to say that. It takes a lot to admit when you're wrong, and I respect that. I respect you for doing it." Mark's heart swells with a mixture of relief and gratitude so intense that it nearly overwhelms him. But he also knows, with a clarity that has been building throughout this encounter, that this moment is just the beginning. The road ahead will be filled with challenges, lessons he must learn if he hopes to change his ways, if he hopes to become the kind of person who deserves the grace that Steve has just extended to him. "Thank you," Mark whispers, the words barely audible. "Thank you for that." As he returns to his seat, moving slowly through the cabin, he feels a sense of clarity washing over him like a cleansing tide, realization that this experience is not just about Steve or the insult, but about himself and the person he wants to be. A man capable of kindness and humility, rather than arrogance and cruelty. A man who can admit his mistakes and learn from them. His friends look at him with a mixture of confusion and something that might be respect. Tom gives him a slight nod, an acknowledgement of what he's just done. David puts his phone away, seeming to understand that the drama has reached its resolution. In that moment, Mark understands that true strength lies not in belittling others, but in lifting them up. And as the plane continues its journey through the skies, cutting through clouds and wind currents, he begins to contemplate the changes he needs to make. Not just for himself, but for everyone around him. He thinks about the people he's hurt over the years with his arrogance, the relationships he's damaged with his pride, the opportunities he's missed to show kindness instead of cruelty. The realization is humbling, but it's also liberating. For the first time in a long time, Mark feels like he might be able to become someone better than he was before. And as he looks out the window at the endless sky stretching before him, he makes a silent promise to himself to be better, to do better, to become the kind of person worthy of the grace that Steve has shown him. As the plane sails through the sky, cutting a path through the clouds like a knife through silk, Mark's mind is a whirlpool of thoughts and emotions. The tension that had gripped him earlier begins to dissipate, replaced by a tentative sense of hope. The confrontation with Steve has opened a door inside him, a door he didn't know existed, leading to possibilities he had once thought beyond his reach. The seed of change has been planted, and now the challenge is to nurture it, to let it grow and flourish. For the remainder of the flight, Mark turns introspection into an art form. He watches the passengers around him, observing their interactions, their laughter, their genuine connections. A couple seated across the aisle shares a playful conversation, stealing glances at each other that speak of intimacy and shared history. A family a few rows back play games together, their laughter ringing out like music, a joyful symphony that drowns out the hum of the engines. Mark feels a pang of longing as he realizes how far removed he has been from this kind of authentic connection. How often he has sacrificed genuine relationships for the shallow rewards of status and power. He glances at Steve again, who is now sharing a light-hearted story with the woman he had been talking to earlier. The way Steve gestures, the way his eyes sparkle with enthusiasm, it's clear that he is not just a performer on a stage. He is a storyteller, a conduit of laughter and empathy. Mark's chest tightens with admiration mixed with envy. He thinks about how easy it is for Steve to connect with others, how he can make people feel seen and heard. It's a skill Mark has always struggled with, overshadowed by his need to be the center of attention, to dominate conversations, to be the one everyone looks at. As the flight progresses, Mark reflects on the choices he has made throughout his life. Choices that have often placed ambition above compassion, success above sincerity. He thinks about his career in marketing, the cutthroat nature of the industry, the constant pressure to outdo competitors, to climb the ladder faster than anyone else. In that relentless pursuit, he had lost sight of what truly matters. The people he interacts with, the relationships he builds, the kindness he shares. For the first time, he questions whether this path is truly fulfilling. Sure, he has accolades and achievements, a comfortable lifestyle, and a reputation for being a top performer. But at what cost? He realizes that he has often prioritized his image over authenticity, his need for validation over genuine connection. The realization is sobering, and he feels the weight of remorse settle on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. Mark pulls out a notebook from his briefcase, a habit he had cultivated during his early career, writing down ideas, reflections, goals. He hasn't used it in a while, but now it feels like the perfect vessel for his thoughts. Flipping to a blank page, he begins to write, the pen gliding across the paper as if guided by an unseen force. I want to change, he scribbles at the top of the page. I want to be better. I want to be kinder, more empathetic. I want to connect with people, not just use them as stepping stones to success. The words come pouring out, a cathartic release of everything he has bottled up inside. He writes about the moment with Steve, the embarrassment, the regret, and the small flicker of hope that has taken root in his heart. I realized today that humor can be a weapon or a bridge. I want to use it as a bridge. He pauses, thinking deeply about what that means. A bridge to connect rather than a weapon to divide. He wants to learn the art of storytelling, of making people laugh without tearing others down. He wants to uplift, to inspire, to heal with his words rather than wound. As he writes, he feels a sense of clarity wash over him, a feeling of direction that had been absent for far too long. He imagines what it might be like to approach his career and his relationships with this new perspective. What if he focused on collaboration instead of competition? What if he sought to empower others rather than undermine them? What if he learned to listen more than he speaks? The thought is exhilarating. He feels a surge of determination. This flight isn't just a journey through the air, it's a journey toward personal growth and redemption. When they land, he vows to take action. He will reach out to Steve, not just to apologize further, but to express his desire to learn from him. He wants to understand how to connect authentically, how to use humor as a tool for good rather than as a means of belittling others. As the plane begins its descent, Mark's heart races with anticipation and anxiety. The realization that he is on the precipice of change fills him with a mixture of excitement and fear. What if he fails? What if he doesn't have the strength to follow through? But deep down, he knows that growth requires risk, that true transformation comes from stepping outside one's comfort zone. The plane touches down smoothly, and the cabin fills with the sound of applause, a customary gesture of relief and gratitude. Mark joins in, clapping half-heartedly as he feels the adrenaline coursing through him. He looks out the window, watching the runway grow closer, and he makes a silent promise to himself to embrace the discomfort that comes with change, to lean into vulnerability, and to strive to be a better man. As passengers begin to gather their belongings, Mark takes one last glance at Steve, who is now standing up, stretching his legs and chatting amicably with the woman from earlier. Mark feels a pull to join them, to step into the light and face the consequences of his actions. But he also knows he needs to gather his thoughts first. Once the seatbelt sign goes off, he stands up, taking a deep breath to steady himself. With purposeful steps, he walks down the aisle, feeling the weight of every gaze upon him. He approaches Steve, who turns, surprise flickering across his features once more. "Hey, Steve," Mark begins, his voice steady this time, the confidence rooted in the resolve he has found within himself. "I wanted to thank you again for your understanding earlier. I really appreciate it. I mean it. And I'd love to learn more from you about how you connect with people. If you're open to it, I'd really like to grab coffee sometime." Steve's expression shifts from surprise to genuine interest. He nods slowly, a smile breaking across his face. "I'd be happy to, Mark. We all have our moments, right? It's about what we do afterward that counts." Mark feels the weight of relief wash over him, but he also knows that this is just the beginning of a long journey toward becoming the person he wants to be. As they step off the plane and into the bustling airport terminal, he takes a deep breath, ready to embrace whatever comes next. This is not just a new chapter in his life. It's the beginning of a whole new book, one filled with promise, growth, and redemption. With each step he takes, Mark feels lighter, as if the burdens of his past are being shed, replaced by the hope of a brighter future. He walks into the crowded terminal, surrounded by the hum of life and laughter, ready to face the world anew. As Mark strides through the bustling terminal, the atmosphere buzzes with energy, filled with the sounds of families reuniting, business travelers rushing to catch connecting flights, and the distant hum of airport announcements echoing through the corridors. The vibrant chaos contrasts sharply with the internal calm he is beginning to cultivate. For the first time in a long while, he feels hopeful, almost giddy with the prospect of change. With each step, he reflects on the conversation with Steve, replaying it in his mind like a cherished memory. The warmth of Steve's response, the kindness in his eyes, has ignited a spark in Mark, a determination to forge genuine connections rather than superficial ones. He pulls out his phone, pondering how to follow up with Steve. Perhaps they could meet at a coffee shop near the airport, or even in the city where they both live. 1,000 ideas swirl in his mind, each one a new opportunity to learn and grow. As he approaches the baggage claim, Mark notices a small cafe tucked into a corner, its warm lights inviting and its aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. The thought of sitting down with a steaming cup of coffee and reflecting on everything that has transpired feels appealing. He decides to take a moment to gather his thoughts before reaching out to Steve. Mark orders a cappuccino and finds a cozy table by the window, watching the world outside as travelers come and go. He takes a sip of his drink, letting the rich flavor envelop him, grounding him in the present moment. The warmth spreads through him, and he closes his eyes, savoring the taste as he reflects on his new commitment to change. Then, he pulls out his notebook once more, flipping to a new page. This one feels different, filled with potential. As he begins to write, he allows his thoughts to flow freely, documenting not just his ambitions, but also the lessons he has learned from his encounter with Steve. He writes about vulnerability, empathy, and the importance of kindness in a world that often glorifies competition and success at any cost. I want to approach each interaction with intention, he writes, to listen more than I speak, to uplift rather than to belittle. I want to be the kind of person who makes others feel valued and respected. Lost in his thoughts, Mark hardly notices when a figure approaches his table. It isn't until he looks up that he recognizes the familiar face. It's Steve, with a bright smile that instantly lifts Mark's spirits. The comedian is carrying a coffee of his own, and he gestures toward the seat across from Mark. "Mind if I join you?" Steve asks, his voice warm and inviting. Mark's heart races with a mix of excitement and apprehension, but he quickly nods, gesturing for Steve to take a seat. "Not at all. I was just thinking about you," Mark replies, trying to keep his tone casual, though he can feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins. It's one thing to apologize. It's another to be sitting here, sharing a space with someone he has admired for so long. As Steve settles in, Mark can't help but notice the ease with which he commands the space around him. There's a confidence in his posture, a relaxed demeanor that makes it easy to engage. Mark feels a flicker of envy again, but quickly quashes it. This is not a competition. It's an opportunity for connection. "I didn't expect to run into you here," Steve says, taking a sip of his coffee. "I'm glad I did. I was just thinking about our conversation on the plane. You really took a brave step by coming over." Mark feels his cheeks flush with both embarrassment and gratitude. "Thank you. It was honestly one of the hardest things I've done in a while. I've been reflecting on it a lot since then." Steve nods, his expression open and encouraging. It's not easy to admit when we're wrong, especially in front of others. But it's a crucial part of growth. And it sounds like you're ready to embrace that. Mark takes a breath, feeling a rush of warmth at Steve's words. "I am. I've realized how much I need to change. I want to be better, not just for myself, but for the people around me. I want to learn how to connect with others genuinely, not just for the sake of networking or personal gain." Steve leans forward, intrigued. That's a powerful realization. It's so easy to get caught up in the grind and forget what really matters. But the connections we build are what sustain us, what enrich our lives. "What do you do for work again?" "I'm in marketing," Mark replies, a hint of hesitation creeping into his voice. "But I'm starting to see how much the industry can prioritize competition over collaboration. I want to shift that focus, to find ways to build authentic relationships with clients and colleagues." Steve smiles, a knowing glint in his eye. That's a great mindset. Marketing is about storytelling after all. If you can craft a narrative that resonates with people on a deeper level, you'll find success will follow. It's about connecting with the heart of your audience. Mark feels a surge of excitement at the prospect of learning from Steve, someone who has honed this craft to perfection. I'd love to hear more about your approach, your philosophy. If you're open to it, I'd like to learn from you. Steve chuckles softly, a twinkle in his eyes. I'd be happy to share what I know. It's always refreshing to meet someone who wants to grow. We can trade stories over coffee anytime. I'm all about sharing the knowledge. In that moment, Mark realizes that he has not only encountered an inspiring figure in Steve, but has also found a potential mentor, someone who can guide him on this journey of transformation. The possibilities seem endless, and Mark feels a renewed sense of purpose blossoming within him. They talk for what feels like hours, sharing laughs, personal stories, and insights. Mark learns about Steve's early struggles in the industry, the rejections he faced, and the perseverance that ultimately led him to success. Steve listens intently as Mark shares his own journey, the challenges he has faced, and the lessons he has learned through the years. As their conversation flows, Mark feels a genuine connection forming, a bond built on mutual respect and understanding. This is what he's been missing, the authentic relationships he yearns for. He leaves the cafe with a heart full of hope and a mind buzzing with inspiration. With every step he takes toward the exit, Mark feels lighter, as if the burdens he carried before are being shed, replaced by the promise of new beginnings. He glances back at Steve, who waves goodbye with that infectious smile, and Mark knows that this encounter is just the beginning of something profound. As he steps out into the sunlight, he takes a deep breath, inhaling the fresh air filled with possibility. This journey is not just about personal growth. It's about forging connections, lifting others up, and embracing the power of vulnerability. Mark knows that he has a long way to go, but he is ready to embrace the challenge, to learn, to grow, and to become the man he aspires to be. In the days following his encounter with Steve, Mark feels an invigorating sense of purpose driving him forward. Each morning, he awakens with a sense of anticipation, ready to embrace the changes he has committed to, eager to apply the lessons he has learned. He starts his day with a journal entry, documenting his thoughts and aspirations, a ritual he hopes will ground him as he navigates this new path. Despite the excitement bubbling within him, Mark knows that change is rarely a straightforward journey. Old habits and patterns of behavior linger like shadows, waiting to resurface when he least expects it. The world he inhabits, filled with competitive colleagues and a relentless corporate culture, poses a constant challenge to his resolve. Back at work, Mark's first task is to lead a team meeting. He enters the conference room with a renewed sense of intention, determined to foster a collaborative atmosphere rather than the cutthroat environment he has previously indulged in. As his colleagues file in, he takes a deep breath, reminding himself of his commitment to connect and uplift. "Thanks for coming, everyone," Mark begins, his voice steady but warm. "I wanted to start our meeting with a quick round of appreciation. Let's share one thing we admire about each other's work." The suggestion is met with a mixture of surprise and hesitation. His colleagues exchange glances, clearly unaccustomed to such a personal approach in a meeting designed for strategy and data. Mark feels a twinge of doubt creeping in. What if they dismiss his idea? What if they laugh it off? But he pushes those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the positive changes he wishes to cultivate. After a moment, Mary, a junior member of the team, tentatively speaks up. "I really appreciate how you always take the time to explain things, Mark. It makes it easier for us to understand the bigger picture. Mark beams at her, feeling a rush of encouragement. Thank you, Mary. That means a lot. Your insights during our last project were invaluable. You have a great eye for detail. As others begin to share their thoughts, the atmosphere shifts. Laughter bubbles up, and a sense of camaraderie begins to develop. Mark feels a sense of triumph at having initiated this moment of connection, but he knows that it's only the beginning. He must remain vigilant against the old habits that have dictated his behavior for so long. Later that afternoon, Mark finds himself in a conversation with Tom, a colleague known for his sharp tongue and competitive nature. As they discuss an upcoming project, Tom makes a cutting remark about another team's proposal, a jab that Mark knows is intended to undermine rather than constructively critique. Mark feels a familiar urge rising within him, the instinct to retaliate, to defend his position with sarcasm or wit. But instead of responding in kind, he takes a deep breath, reminding himself of the values he wants to embody. I think they've put a lot of effort into that proposal, Tom, he replies, choosing his words carefully. It might be worth considering their perspective. They've approached the project differently, and it could lead to some interesting insights. Tom raises an eyebrow, clearly surprised by Mark's unexpected response. You're defending them? Seriously? I'm not defending them per se, Mark says, maintaining his composure. I just think we could benefit from looking at this as a team effort. We all want the best outcome, right? The conversation takes a different turn as Tom considers Mark's words, though skepticism lingers in his expression. Mark feels a mix of anxiety and relief. He has resisted the urge to engage in the usual banter of one-upmanship. It's a small victory, but every step forward counts. As the week progresses, Mark continues to implement his new approach, striving to cultivate connections with his colleagues while navigating the complexities of his workplace dynamics. He often finds himself at a crossroads, wrestling with the familiar urge to slip back into old habits. During one particularly stressful day, he overhears a conversation in the break room where a colleague makes a joke at someone else's expense. The laughter that follows is infectious, and Mark feels the familiar tug to join in. But instead of laughing, he steps forward, his heart racing. Hey, I think we should celebrate each other's successes instead of tearing each other down. It's amazing how much we all contribute to the team. The room falls silent, and Mark's stomach churns with uncertainty. He fears he might have overstepped, but then he sees a glimmer of understanding in a few of his colleagues' eyes. After a few moments of awkward silence, Lisa, another team member, nods in agreement. You're right, Mark. We need to be more supportive of each other. A few others murmur their assent, and Mark feels a flicker of hope reignite within him. That evening, as he reflects on his day, Mark feels a mix of pride and exhaustion. He has faced the challenge head-on, but it has required a level of emotional energy he hadn't anticipated. Change is not just about adopting new behaviors. It's about confronting the emotional landscape of his past and making peace with it. He knows he will stumble and falter, but he is determined to keep moving forward. Mark decides to reach out to Steve, excited to share his experiences and seek guidance. He sends a message proposing a coffee meeting, eager to discuss the challenges he has faced and how he can continue to grow. Within moments, Steve responds with enthusiasm, and they set a time for the following week. In the days leading up to their meeting, Mark feels a blend of excitement and apprehension. He knows that sharing his struggles with someone he admires will require vulnerability, but he is ready to embrace that discomfort. Each interaction at work serves as a reminder of the importance of kindness and connection, and he is eager to learn more from Steve's insights. When the day of their meeting arrives, Mark steps into the cafe feeling a mix of anticipation and nerves. He spots Steve seated at a corner table, his demeanor relaxed and welcoming. As they greet each other, Mark feels an immediate sense of comfort, the kind that comes from knowing he is among someone who understands the journey he is on. "I'm really looking forward to hearing about your experiences," Mark says as they settle into their seats. "I've been trying to apply what we talked about after our flight, but it hasn't been easy." Steve smiles knowingly. Change rarely is. It's like trying to steer a ship. It takes time and persistence, but every little adjustment matters. "Tell me about what you've been facing." As Mark shares his challenges and triumphs, he feels the weight of his struggles lifting slightly with each word. Steve listens intently, nodding and offering insights that resonate deeply. They discuss the complexities of navigating workplace dynamics, the importance of fostering a supportive environment, and the courage it takes to remain authentic in a competitive world. "Remember," Steve advises, "it's not about perfection. It's about progress. Celebrate the small victories, and don't be too hard on yourself when you slip back into old habits. It's part of the process." Mark absorbs Steve's words, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. It's comforting to know that he isn't alone in this journey, that even someone so accomplished has faced similar struggles. Their conversation flows effortlessly, and as they wrap up, Mark feels invigorated and inspired. "Thank you for your wisdom, Steve. I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. It's been incredibly helpful," Mark says, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Anytime, Mark. I'm here to help. Remember, the journey is ongoing. Just keep moving forward, one step at a time," Steve replies, his smile warm and encouraging. As they part ways, Mark walks away with a renewed sense of purpose. He knows he will face challenges ahead, but now he feels equipped to navigate them with grace and resilience. The journey of growth is not a destination, but a continuous path, and he is committed to walking it with intention, kindness, and authenticity.